Hello and welcome to Tête à Tête, France 24's flagship interview show. Our guest is John Bolton. He served as National Security Advisor in the first Trump administration. Since leaving his position in 2019, he has become a fierce Trump critic. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Mr. Bolton.
Well, thanks for having me. Glad to be with you.
During the first Trump administration, you strongly advocated regime change in Iran, but it seemed President Trump then refused to go ahead. Are you satisfied he has now decided to do it alongside Israel?
Well, it's not clear exactly what he's decided to do. He has certainly said, particularly at the early stages of the military activity, that regime change was a goal, but his advisors have said many other things as well. I think it's clear that the Israeli goal is regime change. So we'll have to see how it turns out. I think the military operations so far have been effective in doing what they need to do to help create the conditions for regime change, destroying the Revolutionary Guard's capabilities and its ability to threaten its neighbors and really countries around the world, and also threaten its own citizens. And I think the leadership in Iran has been decidedly reduced, but I don't think we've done enough to help the opposition. As the regime comes under pressure and as its ability to repress the people in Iran especially become clear, there will be splits in the regime at the top, and exploiting those divisions and disagreements is critical to pulling the regime apart and seeing it collapse. The opposition can work with leaders in the regime who don't want to go down with the ship, maybe particularly the conventional military, but they need resources, they need communications, they may need weapons. And at least from what we know publicly, and we may not know everything, but it doesn't look like we're doing very much of that. And that concerns me.
Right. One of the arguments, in addition to regime change, pointed by both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, is how close how close Iran was from being able to manufacture a nuclear weapon. But this is clearly contradicted by the most recent and authoritative intelligence reports. So why suddenly this nuclear threat being bandied around?
Well, I agree. I don't, from what information is public, and again, we may not know it all, I don't think Iran was imminently close to achieving nuclear weapons, but I don't think that's required. I don't think the United States or any other country has to wait until its citizens are in dire peril before taking action in self-defense. I'm not sure what prompted Trump in particular to be saying that. Maybe we'll find out more. It goes, what for me is part of the mystery of why he did change his mind to take this very extensive military action against Iran, presumably in aid of regime change, because, as you say, he was against it in the first term. I don't buy the argument that the Israelis somehow tricked him into it. I think Trump had heard these arguments back and forth enough in the first term that there shouldn't have been anything new for him in it. So we're left to guess what the motivating factor for the policy change was.
Well, without betraying the secrets of the discussions then, when you told him we need regime change in Iran, what was his answer?
Well, he was against it. And in fact, he said publicly in the first term that he wanted to eliminate the nuclear program in Iran and the terrorist activity, but he did not favor regime change. And I suppose one of the reasons is that others in the administration who disagreed with me talked about the Strait of Hormuz, talked about attacks on the Gulf Arabs, and all the many other difficulties that are inherent in an effort at regime change. So they were more persuasive in the first term than I was. But as I say, it's still a mystery to me how Trump changed his mind.
Right, but to your point, how can the administration say it is surprised by Iran's reaction? The Strait of Hormuz attacking neighbors' energy infrastructure. I mean, this was clearly already on the table then and probably decades before.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Trump's denials that he knew anything about it or that anybody else foresaw it is just a typical Trump effort to lay the blame off or lay the responsibility off on someone else when he sees that a mistake has been made. I don't have any doubt that the Pentagon at least went through every contingency that they could think of, if for no other reason than to say, here's a contingency and here's how we would deal with it. Maybe Trump wasn't paying attention, or maybe he had something else on his mind. But there's no doubt, both before and I have no doubt, even though I'm not there in the present situation, that he was told of all of this.
Right. You said you don't think there are that many differences between Israel and the United States. Trump lashed out at Benjamin Netanyahu for bombing a major gas infrastructure shared by Iran and Qatar, despite reporting that the U.S. was actually informed and on board. So do you think there is a rift? Maybe Israel hell-bent on regime change and Trump maybe ready to stop the war because of its economic consequences and its potential political consequences in the U.S.?
Yeah, look, I think Trump could be ready to stop the war at almost any moment. Maybe even as we're speaking, he will be declaring total victory. And I think there are undoubtedly divisions between Trump and Netanyahu, but I think that's entirely normal in war. If you look at the history of World War II, divisions between Churchill and Roosevelt on what the priorities ought to be, divisions between Churchill and Roosevelt and de Gaulle on what the priorities ought to be, and yet we managed to get through to success. So with everything at stake, and for Israel, they see it as an existential war too. We shouldn't be surprised that there are tactical disagreements and maybe even larger disagreements. The real question is whether they can hold things together long enough to accomplish whatever it is they want to do. And I think so far that's holding. I thought actually Trump's remarks, even as he was saying he had wished Netanyahu had not struck the Iranian gas terminals, he said, but we're well coordinated, and they moved on from there.
Right. You said what is probably lacking is support for the opposition. Some are saying boots on the ground to effectively have regime change in Iran. Do you think that is still a viable option, or do you think this is out of the question given all the precedents, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc.?
Well, I think it depends on your definition of boots on the ground. You know, if people mean by that a major assault by combat arms, infantry, artillery, armor, an invasion of division plus size, no, I don't see that at all. If by boots on the ground you mean special operators who are probably there already, or relatively small missions for specific tasks, the one that strikes me as most important is at some point securing the enriched uranium, the centrifuges, and other key materials related to the nuclear weapons program. We certainly don't want those to fall into the wrong hands, really, whether there's regime change or not. Now, that's a difficult, dangerous mission, but the nuclear threat is the most acute that we face. And it's not just a question of bombing it from the air, but if we can either make it impossible even for the Iranians to get the material that's buried underground, or secure it in place, or take it out ourselves, one or another of those possibilities.
Right. If the regime is indeed weakened, we're seeing it decapitated by the day, if I may say, there are some who worry that if it remains in place, if there is not an uprising, it will be a much tougher regime determined to, go nuclear or build dirty bombs and so on. Is this a serious concern if Trump decides to pull the plug?
Yeah, look, this should have been a factor in the decision making before launching the effort. If you're really going for regime change, you have to acknowledge the risk that if you fail, you will get a more determined opponent than before. And no matter how much destruction you do to the nuclear program, to the Navy, to the Air Force, to the ballistic missile production facilities, to the backing for the terrorist proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, a regime can rebuild, especially if they can get their oil back out on international markets and get enough finance to get that going again. So I think if, as we say, if you want to get in this, you ought to be in it to win it.
Russia has condemned the war and obviously is losing an ally after Venezuela, after Syria. But could Vladimir Putin see this as an opportunity, not only because of higher oil prices?
Yes, I think he is trying to use the war against Iran to ingratiate himself further with Trump, having in mind keeping Trump on his side in the Ukraine conflict. So a few days ago, last week, I guess, he offered to Trump in a phone call to mediate between the U.S. and Iran, which I think is a hopeless endeavor. And I think Putin probably understood that. But he wanted to say to Trump, see, I'm helping you or I'm available to help you on the Iran question. And he will try and later make use of that when it comes to negotiations with Ukraine.
So in the end, you think the U.S. will prevail in Iran?
Well, I hope so. With Trump, you never can tell what the level of his resolve is. This is an operation that, with an ideal president, would require patience and persistence, which are not two of Trump's strengths.
Ambassador John Bolton, thank you very much for being our guest today, and thank you for watching this edition of Tête à Tête here on France 24.